over the years, I've always taken the position that basically nothing need be done. That, there is I'm an agnostic religiously, which is a what can you show me position. But I've always had the feeling that the universe was put together in such a way that it would work out all right in the end. And have, from my days in the Berkeley underground, I've got a very healthy suspicion of leaders and plans. I mean, I'm even more caustic on the subject of political leaders than I am on the subject of gurus. But nevertheless, well, this is a subject which is very hot in our household, which is the world getting better or is it getting worse? And is there anything that we personally can do about it? And because it's always been my feeling that it was all taken care of from hyperspace, and that it would all make sense in the end when the historical culmination became visible to all the participants, I've taken the position that the real political frontier is ourselves, reconstructing our attitudes, molding ourselves to be as caring, loving, and conscious as we wish that our leaders would be. Nevertheless, the culture crisis is intensifying. There's plenty of evidence that things are getting worse in a hurry. Things like what I talked about last night, the burning of the Amazon, the rise of the greenhouse effect, so forth and so on. So it seems to me there are political options. There are positions that need to be taken that are not being taken. There are answers, even if you are not a transcendentalist, even if you don't believe in the inevitable working out of human history to the satisfaction of everyone. And when you begin to talk politics, you inevitably brush the subject of responsibility and permission. What kind of responsibilities do we have to each other, to the planet, to the future? What kind of permission can we take from each other, from the planet? What is to be done and what can be done? And I wanted to talk a little bit about this morning, some ideas that we'll throw out, basically to get your feedback. It's a little different take than the psychedelic ranger sort of position that you may be used to hearing. The psychedelic movement of the 1960s had no political agenda, really. I mean, Tim Leary's agenda was turn on, tune in, drop out. And the war was a side issue where the New Left made common cause with the psychedelic people, and the war was eventually ended. But the psychedelic movement went nowhere except underground. And I think this was largely because they disdained to set real-world political goals that non-psychedelic people, and let's face it, probably 95% at least of the human race is non-psychedelic. Non-psychedelic people needed an agenda to relate to. And even in my own life, I have a kind of a tendency not to want to dabble in politics, not to want to propose concrete solutions because they are easily subverted, easily attacked. They create factionalism, which I think is a bad thing. But nevertheless, I think there are arenas and theaters of political action that are not being articulated that we could take more seriously. And I want to talk about a few of them fairly briefly and then hopefully we can have a dialogue about this. The first question being, is it necessary at all to have a political agenda? Are we not perhaps becoming frightened by the intensifying of the historical crisis to the point where we doubt our own previous point of view? Or if you think it is necessary to have a political agenda, then what sort of agenda should it be? And I want to start with the most immediate and practical possibilities first, and then move towards some of the more long-range and globally impactful possibilities. Last night we talked about the destruction of the rainforest in Brazil. A very obvious political first step to halting what is going on with the destruction of nature in the third world is to get the international lending community to exercise a degree of moral responsibility. In other words, it's a shocking notion to suggest that the International Monetary Fund only support ecologically sound projects. And yet it seems to me obvious that this should be done. It isn't the Brazilian government that should be blamed for the clearing of the Amazon or the land-hungry Brazilian peasantry. It's the IMF and the World Bank, because they pay for it. They make the multi-billion-dollar loans that make this kind of thing possible. Banks are amenable to political pressure. If their dirty laundry were shrilly laundered in public, they would have a public relations problem that would force them to rethink what they are doing. There was an article in the New York Times about 5 days ago about how world capitalism, big capitalism, is finally actually alarmed by the greenhouse effect because it's hitting their investment. We live in the world, but there are agencies that think they own it. And when they see that their investment is threatened, and that's how they analyze it. These people don't love wild animals and climaxed rainforests. They love money. And when they see their investment threatened, I would think they could be pressured to revise their loan policies. Another step that it seems to me lies directly ahead of us in the future that I do not understand why it isn't more discussed, and can only conclude somewhat lightheartedly, because I don't like being a paranoid, that there must be a conspiracy against what I am about to propose, a conspiracy run by governments. And that is, the international boycott is potentially a tremendous tool for problem solving. But to date, it has been so gutted and watered down that it becomes no more than a gesture. The world today is a global whole. It is very tightly webbed together and spun into itself, one part into another. Let's take the case of South Africa, which I hope with this crowd is a fairly uncontroversial case. Everyone is waving their arms saying something must be done about South Africa. It's a barbarian situation. It's intolerable. And the notion of a boycott as presently practiced is that General Motors will take 18 months to cut its investment there in half. And then this is hailed as a great step forward. But in fact, the financial and political machinery is in place to make life hell for the government of South Africa. If you are serious about changing the policies of a government, you don't threaten to withdraw your investment over 4 years. You say, look, there will be no mail. there will be no telephones. There will be no international banking transactions. You're through. We're just pulling the plug on this scene. And I guarantee you, you would get action. There is no reason why mail should be delivered to that country. There is no reason why telephone service should be maintained with these people. And it is inexcusable to loan them a single dime. Obviously. And, choose whatever problems scattered around the world irk you particularly. Northern Ireland, Israel, Iran-Iraq war, territorial encroachments going on in Africa. If these people were just told no money, no phone, no mail, no trade, nothing, it would... and I believe that this isn't done because every government fears that if the machinery to apply tools like this were in place, it might eventually be their turn. And no country wants to face that because that's serious. You can't go forward. They're just calling in the chips when they do that. So this is something which, rather than feeling totally powerless, we should all advocate the tremendous strengthening of the notion of international boycotts. This is very useful. Not a shot needs to be fired. And it goes without saying, weaponry should be withheld from these people. Spare parts, technology, engineers. These South Africans should not be sending their people to our engineering schools. In fact, their passports shouldn't be honored anywhere. They should be invited to go home and live in their wonderful society if they think it's so great. And they can forget about phoning New York or getting mail from New York and Paris.
But you're suggesting this originally here as an ecological, as a technique for leaning on the situations that are laying waste.
I think it can be applied to like the Brazilian situation, the South African situation, Wars cannot be fought without an influx of capital, materiel, and information. It's obviously something that people would favor, that governments would oppose. And so I've never heard any politician of any stripe, from Gorbachev to Bush, suggest that the strengthening of the machinery of international boycotts would be an obvious first step toward putting this planet on a reasonable course.